Bonjour les amis, this is Jean-Michel Grosjeu and welcome to the 6th video in my series about Stationfall, the latest modern great immersion game designed by Tentacled and published by Ion Games. In my 4th and 5th video, we went through a gallery of 24 characters. 24 out of 27 because I kept the best trio for the last, the most strange and zany characters in the game, the legal robot, the digital assistant and the telepathic rat. Then we'll take time to step back a little and look at special characters category, my goal being to help you understand what each character is useful for and see in a glimpse at the beginning of your own games what characters can help you and what will be your worst opponents. And finally, we will browse together the 8 possible Project X you can find in the Vault X, how they work and what harm they can do. Fine. And so the legal robot. This character is special and unique because in a way it changes one of the most important things in the game. It changes the rules for escaping the station. When the legal robot is in play, 3 out of 4 standard escape pods are flipped. The Alcatraz, the Houdini and the McQueen pods. And what does it change? It adds a new prerequisite to the launch. These 3 pods now can be launched if the abandoned ship status has been triggered, okay, but also if all characters inside the pod possess an NDA. What is an NDA? This is a new kind of data that exists only when the legal robot is in play. This robot was programmed to guarantee the megacorporation that no one is allowed to disclose what they have seen or learned inside the station. Okay, we all know that such legal issues are crucial in business time, but it's no longer business time. The station is falling and for the moment everyone is focused on saving their own lives. But, as any other robot in here, the legal robot doesn't mind. It has been programmed to do one thing and it goes on doing that thing to the last moment. And that's why everyone needs an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, to take a seat on an escape pod. If there is a character inside the pod that doesn't own his NDA, no launch action can be performed on that pod. So, in a game where the legal robot is in play, this NDA data becomes a precious resource a player will be seeking out. So first, where do you find it? There is only one way to get your NDA. This is an action that only the legal robot is able to do. Process server. You activate the robot and for one action, you put an NDA data token on every character in the same section. In this example, there are 3 characters in the rec room with the legal robot. For one process server action, all 3 get their NDA. And thus, all these 3 characters are now able to flee the station with one of the 3 pods, Houdini, Alcatraz and McQueen, provided of course that the abandoned ship status has been triggered. Okay, this doesn't seem so difficult, but wait, here is the trick. NDA are strictly personal and permanent data. You should see it as a passport. And that means that NDA data cannot be copied, nor deleted, nor robbed. In other words, the only way for a character to get the NDA data is to be in the same section as the legal robot when it does its process server action. So, you understand as important it is to have the legal robot in your conspiracy when it is in play. If you cannot activate it, you cannot get NDAs, and you cannot choose who will be able to escape the station. And thus, at the very beginning of the game, take a close look at who needs to escape and who doesn't, because this NDA requirement makes things a little more difficult for the escape team. You should also consider the different ways to escape. The station chief with her medevac, the colonel with his panic pod, the inspector with their shuttle, the pirates rescue ship and the daredevil's rocket wings. All these characters add alternate ways to escape the station, and so as you see, the role of this legal robot in the game is highly context dependent. Okay, but beside this NDA annoyance, this legal robot can also be a great help. As an action, he can downgrade a player from the guilty status to suspect only. For that, it must be in the same location as a revealed player's character. So, if you remember, there is usually only one way to erase your guilt, that is, to escape to Earth with an evidence data. Now there is one more way, and so much easier. You activate the legal robot, and for one action, you are not guilty anymore. Note that this is possible only because the stowaway has already been revealed as Red player's main character, and she is in the same section as the legal robot. The opposite is also possible. The legal robot can make an innocent player character suspect. Okay, and all this is only what happens when the legal robot is just a non-player character. But what happens if a player chooses it as his main character? And first, what are the legal robot objectives? Of course, the robot wants to do what it was programmed to do. 1 victory point for each human that escapes to Earth with an NDA. Not so easy to do, but there can be a good synergy with human players who want to escape from the station. And then, the next goal is the next logical step. If all humans that escape have their NDA, 4 victory points. And that includes the case where no human escape at all. Saying the same the other way, as soon as one human without NDA escapes the station, the legal robot cannot earn these 4 victory points anymore. With the same logic, 2 victory points if no evidence reaches the Earth. And the last one is funny, 1 victory point for each suspect player at the end of the game. It's the expected result of its lawyer action. Because suspect is the best status for a lawyer, the legal robot tries to keep everyone in this condition. Fine, now if you see the picture from other players' point of view, there is a problem. As soon as the legal robot is revealed as a player's main character, nobody can influence and activate it anymore. So, no way to use its process server action to get the NDA you need to escape the station. Luckily, a new action is unlocked, hard copy. And this action is special because it is not for the use of the robot itself, but any character in the same section as the legal robot can use it. The stowaway shares the same section as the legal robot. Blue player can activate her and do the hard copy action to get her NDA. And so, as soon as the legal robot is revealed as a player's character, it cannot avoid giving NDA to characters who just come and ask. And finally, the great trickery behind this NDA business. Once revealed, the legal robot's player can activate any character who owns an NDA. In our example, Red player on his turn can activate the stowaway even if she doesn't belong to his conspiracy. The NDA is enough to give the robot the right to activate her. This is the magical power of the law. You signed it, you must comply. Of course, this works only on non-player characters, that is, on non-revealed characters. Next, the digital assistant. And this character is extremely special because it has no physical existence, no wooden token on the map. The digital assistant is purely made of data. It has no inventory, it cannot own any item nor any data. It is pure artificial intelligence. It is the mind of the station itself. And still, you can choose its identity card as your main character. You can get yourself into this electronic mind. Fine, at the beginning of the game, the digital assistant is nowhere on the map. But still, you can influence it to get it in your conspiracy. And because the digital assistant is made to serve all the station's passengers, no player can control it more than the others. No one can have more than a single influence cube on its card. And with a cube on it, you can activate it. But what for? What can you do with a character that doesn't exist on the map? You can do console actions. When you activate the digital assistant, you are kind of inside the console. Great, you can turn the jammers off and on, and you can suppress hazards. And that's all. Is it a joke? No, of course, because first, you get a special console action that only exists when the digital assistant is in play, the lockdown action. With this action, you can add a lock anywhere, or remove an existing lock, or move a lock to another passageway. And see how powerful it can be. For one action, blue player can block the Daredevil inside the fuel cells. Great. But beware, red player can remove the lock by activating also the digital assistant, and any character in the security station or the mainframe can use a standard console action to do the same. The lockdown console action is just one more choice for the console action, and the digital assistants can do console action out of nowhere without any physical presence on the board. Okay, go on. When the digital assistant is in play, a new action is added to the mainframe section. Any character in the mainframe can manufacture a digital assistant data. What is it? It is a data like any other. It can be manufactured here in the mainframe, and after that, like any other standard data, it can be copied or robbed or deleted. Fine, but why would the chimpanzee, for example, want this data on his card? Because once a character has the digital assistant data, he can use officer-only actions and can launch an escape pod without the abandoned ship status. So now our chimpanzee can go to the cryolab and release the Project X. This is an officer-only action, but with this digital assistant data, he can do that. Note that the digital assistant data does not allow characters to go through locked passageways like officers do. Only officer actions become available. And then a player can reveal that his secret identity is the digital assistant. In other words, the station's AI decides to play its own conspiracy and to go for its own objectives. And what does an AI want? It wants to survive. And it survives by duplicating its code into robots, 2 victory points per surviving robot with the digital assistant data, and also into human electronic devices, 1 victory point for each surviving human with the data, and also for data tokens on offsites, the news and the authorities. And 2 victory points again if at last 2 copies of the digital assistant data reach the Earth. In our example, just because the consort and the chimpanzee escape to the Earth is enough to get these 2 victory points. Even better with the data sent to the news. Okay, but up to now, because there is no digital assistant character on the map, a digital assistant player can only move other characters belonging to his conspiracy. Is it enough to unfold his plans and do whatever action he needs? Fortunately, once revealed, the digital assistant gets a powerful capability, root access. He can control and activate any robot with the digital assistant data. He can activate this cyborg, for example, despite its blue cubes. And he can even ignore self-preservation. For example, he can take this cyborg into a burning section and immediately knock it down. Before revealing, the digital assistant player could especially try to put its data into robots to build the army it will need as soon as it reveals. And if other players are so suspicious that they prevent the data from spreading among their character, when it reveals, the digital assistant can copy its digital assistant data to any one character who possesses an evidence data or a secret X data. And this works even if the character belongs to another conspiracy, and even if it's another player's main character. And that's it. A strange character indeed, but not so difficult to play. Note that it can win the game even if it is guilty, so it can try some really nasty things. If the digital assistant is in play, you should stay on your guard. And now it's time to tackle the real star of this game. Yes, you know it, the famous telepathic rat. The rat is not a character. It's too far from humanity to get its token like the chimpanzee. Still, he has some sort of token, but a cubic one. Square, you might say. Square like an item. Because yes, the telepathic rat is an item. and as such it cannot own items or data. The rat has no inventory, it cannot be attacked, it is never down, the animal always stays inside its plastic box, it doesn't fear fire nor asphyxiation. Perfect, but as an item, it cannot do any action. It cannot walk, it cannot attack, it cannot pick up anything. And so, what can it do? At least other characters can use it as an item. The doctor can pick up the rat and take it into her inventory. Then she can throw it into the cryolab, for example. And is that all? Why the doctor should take it and throw it in the cryolab? First, you should consider that our rat is not everybody's rat. It is a telepathic rat. You can influence it. You can put cubes on its card, but only if there's already some character from your conspiracy in the same section. Some of your friends must come in person to convince the paranoid animal. Here, red player can add some influence cube on the rat because the doctor, already in the same section, belongs to red player's conspiracy. Also, the rat cannot be bribed. Money is useless in a rat's world. Okay, but why bring the rat in your conspiracy? Because by activating it, you can make a telepathy action and perform an action with any human character in the same section. And this action ignores self-preservation. For example, red player activates the rat, and with telepathy, he orders the colonel to shoot the security robot. The robot is down, and then with its second action, it orders the colonel to shoot himself. Bang, the colonel is down. Easy, isn't it? 2 characters down by the sheer power of rodent telepathy. And it works on any human character, even ones like the colonel, who is blue player's reveal character. Robots cannot be manipulating using telepathy, and telepathy is useless against a character wearing a helmet. So there are ways to protect yourself against the beast. And what if the rat is your main character? What the animal is looking for? It is angry, very angry. Thanks to its enhanced brain, it understands how humans are cruel and it wants its revenge. So its main goal is to have as many down characters, humans and robots, in its section at the end of the game when the station finally explodes. The rat doesn't want to survive. It wants to end all this mess on a pile of corpses. 1 victory point for each body. And because it wants to teach a lesson to humanity, it wants to show to its victims some proofs of their villainy. 2 victory points for each compromat the player owns that matches these down characters in the same section as the rat. And because it wants also to punish the megacorporation itself, 2 victory points for the briefcase and 2 for the artifact if these items are in the same location as the rat at the end of the game. And that's pretty much it. The telepathic rat is not so difficult to understand, but it is difficult to handle. Its worst weakness being that it cannot move without being carried inside another character's inventory. And as soon as someone is carrying it, it can always be thrown into outer space or into fire or whatever. Blue player can activate the Daredevil to throw the rat outside the station thanks to the airlock action. That's why, as soon as it is revealed as a player's main character, the rat cannot be thrown or dropped anymore. Revealing as the rat gives you some kind of protection. And note, finally, that as it begins the game in the biolab, the rat is contaminated. It gets a contamination token, even if it has no inventory boxes. Et voila! We've reached the end of our 27 character gallery. With the YouTube index at the bottom of your screen, you can check each character individually if needed in my video number 4, 5 or 6. And we should say, all's fine. We understand all these people capabilities and now it's time to play. Yes, you're right. But what I propose now is to take a little time again to step back and categorize these characters according to their skills and objectives. My goal here is to show you that your strategy planning begins as soon as you know which characters you'll have to play with, because a large part of your victory begins at game setup and when you decide who will be your main and your bonus characters. The first way to categorize characters, the most obvious way, is to the left, the 16 characters who want to escape and survive, to the right, the 9 characters that don't want and don't need to survive. In the middle, the legal robot who doesn't want to survive but who earns points if others survive, and the drones who don't want anything. And this is the first thing to do when you begin a new game. Evaluate what proportion of characters will try to escape and what proportion will not. Don't choose an escaping character if there are chances that a majority of other players will stay and fight on board. Then, how many officers do you have in your game? There are 5 possible officers. The more officers, the easier it will be to operate the station's critical commands, triggering the abandoned ship status, releasing the Project X, and so on. Note that the digital assistant can give this officer's privilege to anybody. Next question, how many characters are able to repair the station? Only 4 characters can repair a damaged section, with their jury-rig action and with disassemble for the drones. Damaging sections is a good way of preventing access to some vital actions, so if no one on board can repair, this can change your game. Another question, are there characters who can win even if guilty? 5 characters have this capability. The 2 fugitives, of course, the border and the cyborg, but also the rat and the digital assistant. These characters will be the most dangerous and the most aggressive. Note that the engineer can win guilty, but he gets a bonus if innocent. Then you have another kind of calculation to do. Let's take the astrochimp as an example. 3 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, at best, the chimpanzee can score 9 victory points. And more or less, the same calculation can be done for all characters. Beware, these values could be discussed for hours. I write them here just to give you an idea of what to look out for. Orange values are for characters who will naturally earn less victory points, and red stars show characters with negative goals. They don't have to do something to score points, they have to avoid that something happens. So, characters with orange or red color will have to interact more with others. They will have to keep an eye on other players and make sure others don't succeed in achieving their own goals. In other words, if you play such a character, you cannot stay in your shell. You must guess other players' strategies and try to hinder them. Now let's talk about your conspiracy. Your main character is not the only one who matters, and you'll need to gather an efficient team. But some characters are more difficult to recruit. The astrochimp and the microbiologist are loyal. Only one player can influence them. There can be an auction at the beginning of the game to know who can bid the most to get these characters in his team. The medical robot and the digital assistant are helpful. This is quite the opposite. No one can have more than 1 cube on them. So, no rush. You'll put 1 cube when you need their services. The colonel and the telepathic rat are paranoid. You must have one of your conspirators in their section to influence them. You could, for example, check nearby characters to know who will be your ambassador to the rat or the colonel. Also, check the influence limit of your main character. The majority of characters have an influence limit of 5. Some have just 4, others have 6, and 2 extreme characters, the billionaire with a limit of 3 and the telepathic rat with 8. And this makes a real difference. A character with a limit of only 4 has to be careful not to overextend his conspiracy, while a character with a limit of 6 can count on more allies with more skills and more action possibilities. Think twice before choosing the lonely billionaire. Finally, you can check out more down-to-earth capabilities, for example, who will be able to move fast through the station. The 3 tunnel rats who can walk through vents, the 2 zero-born that get free moves in green and pink sections, and the 2 uncanny characters who are barely exhausted. And of course, the daredevil who can run into hazards and the medical robot who can fly over downed bodies. It can be very useful to have such a fast-moving character in your conspiracy. And finally, some characters will change the station itself, adding new sections or new actions. And what's more, they change the ways characters can escape the station. And yes, there are many other capacities to check out, many other parameters or parameter combinations that can change the game. And it may strongly depend on the particular random draw for your game. For example, think twice before choosing the monkey as your main character if all other characters who need the briefcase are also in play. So, my main goal here is just to draw your attention to the need at the beginning of the game to take the time to study the range of characters you'll be playing with. Good luck! And now, speaking of luck, it's time to talk about the Project X. This thing hidden deep in the Vault X, waiting to be released. One Project X card, 1 out of 8, randomly drawn at the beginning of the game. Players can peek at this card by activating a character with the Secret X data, but mainly it will be a surprise when the Project X will be released. We already know how to release it. So now let's see together what can happen. The Project X is released and it is the Carnivorous bioexperiment. Let's say it is the most classic. And look, it's easy, you just have to follow the instructions. First, you put the monster cylindrical token in the Vault X. As you remember, releasing Project X triggers the abandoned ship status. And this abandoned ship status automatically opens all locks, so our monster is free. Monster actions occur at the end of every player's turn. Here at the end of the resolve phase. But beware, at the end of every player's turn. So the more players there are, the more the monster can do, the more dangerous the monster is. So it's red player's turn, red player has completed his turn. Now the monster must move. It moves one section towards the closest live human. No choice here. It just leaves the Vault X into the cryolab. Then, at the end of blue player's turn, just after red, blue player moves the monster again toward the closest human. But let's suppose that in the meantime, during blue player's turn, the station chief entered the biolab. When it's time to move the monster, 2 humans are equally close. So blue player chooses, just because it is his turn. Each player's turn, the player whose turn it is must choose in the case there is any choice. Blue player chooses to move the monster to the exile section. Next player's turn, yellow player's turn. Yellow player has no choice, being in the same section as a human character. The monster attacks the exile and makes him down, and nothing can prevent it. A helmet is useless. And so you see, the monster's behavior is quite simple. It moves toward the closest human and beats him down when in the same section. In our example, on the next player's turn, it will move toward the station chief. And so on. The monster roams through the stations, spreading havoc along its way. At some point, players will probably want to stop it. The Carnivorous bioexperiment monster can be attacked like a human without a helmet. So you can hit it down with a bludgeon or a gun. It is also down if with a hazard, fire or asphyxiation. Thus you can deal with it, but it's still a very dangerous threat. Even more when you take into account that it can move through vents and that you cannot attack it in an unlit section. Note that monsters can help some players' business, and a player with nanogel can revive the downed monster. And then, at the end of his turn, the monster immediately resumes its run. Note also that a monster has no inventory, no one can give an item to a monster. Next possible monster, the Tentacled monstrosity. Okay, at first glance it works like the Carnivorous bioexperiment. The Tentacled monstrosity just wants to eat things. But then some differences appear with the previous monster. First, when it is its turn to play, so at the end of every player's turn, resolve phase, it eats any one character or item in its section. This is its priority. Note that it can eat humans as well as robots, and it can eat live as well as down characters. And items also, but only items that lay there in the section, not in the character's inventory. And it is up to the acting player to choose if there is any choice. The acting player is the player whose turn it is. So this player can decide that the Tentacled monstrosity eats an item to save some character's life. Such an attacked character or item is swallowed by the monster and his token goes to the monster's card. Any human swallowed without a helmet becomes down. The boarder was swallowed with all her equipment and she's still live inside the monster's stomach. She cannot be activated nor do any action while in this perilous situation. And if there's nothing to eat in its section, the monster's second priority is to drag adjacent prey into its own section, a character live or down or an item. The Tentacled monstrosity is lazy and uses its tentacles to bring food rather than moving its fat body. And finally, if it has no other choice and no adjacent prey, it moves one section toward the closest prey. But humans only, live or down, not items. If it's going to move its fat body, it might as well move towards a juicy prey. It is also tougher than the previous Carnivorous bioexperiment. It can only be downed by fire. Bludgeon or guns are useless. But what's funny is that if you burn it, it becomes down and it regurgitates all its stomach contents. Note that this monstrosity can move through locks and it destroys the lock if it does so. Next monster, the Robotc assassin. This monster is a robot. It is not just hungry or eager to kill like the two previous ones, it is a machine programmed to kill its specific target. So, as soon as a player releases this Project X, this player takes the assassin's target token and puts it on any character, human or robot, anywhere. Then it's pretty simple. On its turn, that is at the end of every player's turn, as usual, the Robotc assassin is moved one section toward its target using the shortest path. And if it starts its turn in the same section as its target, it shoots it down. There is no way to avoid the Robotc assassin's attack. A helmet doesn't protect, being human or robot doesn't change anything. Note that when its victim is down, the target token stays where it is. So, next turns, the Robotc assassin will stay there, watching over its prey. If someone comes and drags the down border elsewhere, the Robotc assassin will follow them and attack again as soon as the border is revived. Okay, easy. But of course, there's a way to change the robot's target. As soon as the Robotc assassin is revealed, a new console action is added, the Mark Target action. So, any character having access to a console action can choose this action and move the target token to any other character. The Robotc assassin is a robot, so it doesn't fear hazards, fire or asphyxiation. It is armored, so it cannot be attacked with a bludgeon. It can move through locked passageways, and it destroys the lock doing so. Note, and this can be fun, the Robotc assassin is counted as a robot when scoring at game end. So, for example, the troubleshooter will try to keep it alive, and you can deprive the operative of one victory point by sending it to the Earth in an escape pod. Next monster, the Entropy Phantom. It is a phantom, a ghost. It can move through vents, it can move through locks without removing them, nothing can stop it. And because it is some kind of ethereal anti-human, its main goal is to reach the antimatter. Every time it moves, so at the end of every player's turn, it will make one step toward the antimatter, wherever it is. As there are 6 movement steps between the Vault X and the magnetic containment, it will take less than 2 turns in a 4 or 5 player game for the Entropy Phantom to reach the antimatter. If the Phantom begins its turn in the same section as the antimatter, it just arms it and disappears. And as you know, 4 turns later, the antimatter explodes. The Entropy Phantom cannot be downed, so there is no way to stop it. Still, it is possible to slow it, because if it starts its turn in the same section as a character, this character loses 1 influence cube to the betrayal box. In fact, that's because the Phantom erases his memory. If there is a choice between cubes, of course, it's up to the acting player, that is, the player whose turn it is. And this is instead of moving, so that's a way to slow down the monster and to spoil opponents' influence cubes. Of course, as you know, the explosion of the antimatter doesn't necessarily mean the end of the game. It can explode in outer space or in an escape pod, for example. But at start, the antimatter is kept behind a locked passageway and inside an unbreathable atmosphere. So if the Phantom makes it to the magnetic containment, don't forget that it can freely move through locks, arms it and disappears, you can imagine how it will be difficult for players to enter the room and save the day. Next monster, the Combat Swarm. This is a swarm of nano-drones, and it started out as an intelligent project to keep the station in good order. The main swarm's capability is jury-rig, and it can indeed repair any damaged section or down a robot. How does it work? As soon as the Combat Swarm Project X is released, a new console action is added. Direct Swarm. So any character with access to console action can for one action move the swarm 2 sections because it is agile and can move twice and even through vents, or make it repair its section or any down robot. And so the swarm works like the drones we already know. So perfect, it has nothing to do with the monster. Wait, because with this same console action, it can attack with the same power as a gun. And you can imagine how powerful it is in the hands of a character like the Stowaway, the Exile or the Digital Assistant, who can do console action from everywhere in the station. Better than that, this weapon is anonymous. If you put a character down with an attack from the Combat Swarm, you don't become suspect, even in plain light, even before cameras. The Combat Swarm cannot be attacked, it cannot be down, unless it enters the magnetic containment section, but as you remember, this section is locked. The Combat Swarm is a robot, a cloud of tiny robots, so it doesn't fear hazards, fire or asphyxiation, and it counts as a robot when calculating the endgame scores. Next one, this time this is not a monster anymore. The grey goo does not appear on the map as a monster token. The grey goo is like a patch of slime slowly spreading from its starting point, the Vault X. As soon as the grey goo Project X is released, the player who released it takes the card in front of him because the grey goo will progress only at the end of this player's turn and not on every player's turns like previous monsters. And now let's see the exact timing of the grey goo because it can be a little tricky. For example, in the middle of his turn, let's say red player releases the grey goo. Let's call this moment turn 0. Red player takes the card in front of him and puts one grey goo token in the Vault X and one other besides number 0 on the card. And so we are now somewhere in the middle of red player's turn. Then, just after that, this is the end of that same red player's turn, the end of his resolve phase. And immediately, the goo spread is increased by 1. On the map, the goo reaches all sections whose distance to the Vault X is 1. There is only one such section, the Cryolab, Note that the goo doesn't spread through vents, that's why it doesn't spread directly from Vault X to the biolab. Note that if a character is in the cryolab, he is not affected by the goo. The sequence for resolve phase is 1. Affect all characters in a goo section, then 2. Spread the goo. So only characters that begins the red player's resolve phase in the goo are affected by the goo. So here, the border in the cryolab doesn't fear the goo, not yet. One turn later, back to red player's turn, end of his resolve phase. Let's call it turn 1 in our sequence. First, the goo affects characters. So, this time, because the border didn't move out of the cryolab, she is attacked by the goo. If an attacked character has a helmet, she loses her helmet and that's all. And then, the goo spreads 2 sections away from the Vault X. Okay, next red player's turn, end of the resolve phase. This time, because the border has no helmet anymore, she is annihilated. Not just down, but annihilated, out of the game. And then the grey goo spreads. Next turn, you see the picture, the goo dissolves its victims and spreads. And finally, next turn, the goo spreads the last time and reaches a spread value of 5. No need to spread it on the map. As soon as the value 5 is reached, the whole station is immediately destroyed. In addition to spreading, the goo did eat away the station structure itself, and this is the end of the game. Note that after releasing the goo, red player did play 4 full turns. That's the same duration until destruction when you arm the antimatter. That's tough, and is there any way to avoid that? The only way is to cut the power. The grey goo needs power to spread. It feeds on energy. So, if there is a blackout status, that is, if at least 2 power sections are damaged, the grey goo doesn't spread. It stays as it is until power is recovered. Note that it is not possible to stop it with locks that you could add with the digital assistant, for example, because the goo can spread through locks. Next possible Project X, the Death Ray. Just like the one in the Star Wars Death Star. It is a weapon, a dreadful weapon. When a player releases this Project X, nothing happens. But a new action is added to the array control, Fire Death Ray. And from now on, any character in the array control section can still transmit data to Earth, but can also instead fire the Death Ray. The Death Ray is an external weapon. It can only fire on external targets. There are 3 possible external targets. First, it can fire on off-sites down on Earth. Off-sites are the news and the authorities. Did you hear that? A character in the array control can decide to destroy the Earth government. If this happens without the authorities, there is no guilt anymore. Guilty players go back to suspect status and nobody can lose the game for being guilty. If the news are destroyed, this cancels all victory conditions related to the news. It is a disaster for the stowaway, for example. The Death Ray can also destroy the border's rescue ship or pirate ship. Of course, only if the border is in play. And that means that no character can escape with these ships. Still, the border can win her victory points, but she must find other ways to escape the station. And finally, the Death Ray can destroy an escape pod already detached and flying in the mesosphere. All characters and items inside are immediately annihilated. And that means that if the Death Ray is in play, you can never be sure of being safe and out of this mess. After launching your escape pod, you must wait for the final station explosion before counting your victory points. But the Death Ray is so powerful that it overloads the station power capacity. As soon as its fire action is used, the reactor section is automatically damaged. And as long as it is damaged, the Death Ray cannot fire anymore, not before someone goes to the reactor and repairs it. And this leads us to our last Project X card, the Stable Wormhole. It is a hole in the fabric of the universe, leading down to Earth at CERN in the mountains of Switzerland. Any item or character that are or enters the Vault X are immediately escaped to Earth. And that's all. This Project X is a game changer that adds a very easy way to escape the station. Note that as soon as this Project X is released, the reactor is damaged. If this is the first power section to be damaged, this is not so bad. But if this leads to a blackout, this can change the endgame even more radically, disabling all sections actions, for example. Note that escaping through the wormhole is not a section action. It's not even an action. You just have to step into the Vault X to be instantly teleported to Earth. Et voilà! This is the end of this 6th video. You know all the rules, you know all the characters in the game, you know all the possible Project X, and what more can you learn? In the 7th and last video, we'll talk about game setup and also special game modes, 2-player game, 3-player game, and game with bots, including solo game plus a team game variant. Allez, salut les amis et à la prochaine fois!